Hey guys, it's Mike here, and welcome to my power scaling series in which I'm going to be going through the entire Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z from start to finish. If you guys are interested, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and enable all notifications, as well as hitting like and hyping this video up so that you'll be able to see every single one of these videos in this series right away when they come out. And in case that you missed some of the series along the way, make sure to check the end screen of this video when it's over so that you'll be able to in turn go to that playlist and see everything else leading up to this. Now, before we begin, I also wanted to tell you about my book series, The Children of Aman, beginning with the first book, Nemesis of the Absence, a story of thieves who band together in the name of vengeance, using the fundamental forces of creation wielded by the main character, Seraph, a speaker. And you get to see a lot of things such as action, adventure, fight scenes, romance, cool powers, and that much more along the way. So if you're interested, make sure to go down below in the description and get your own copy, physical or digital, today. But with that being said, let's get directly into scaling the Cell Saga. So in terms of the other characters, I will get into them soon when it comes to the time skip. But, we have a bunch of stuff that happens at this point leading up to the arrival of Goku, and this is when he and Trunks meet each other. So at this point in time, we learn about things like the fact that Goku has the Shunkan Ito teleportation, and he basically says that that's all he really had time on Yardrat to do, to be able to become a Super Saiyan at will and use the Shunkan Ito. So realistically, he's not that much stronger than he was on Namek, because after all, he didn't have anyone to spar with. He mostly just learned how to use his Super Saiyan at will, and again, how to learn the Shunkan Ito. Sip of water for the working man. Well, guess what? This leads into the two of them sparring. Goku becomes a Super Saiyan, and so does Trunks. We see how shocked everyone is, and no wonder he could take down Frieza. Now, this is Goku fully rested. I don't believe he got a Zenkai after his fight on Namek. That's another thing I'll bring up. I do not believe that at this point in the story that characters actually continue to get either large Zenkais or even Zenkais at all, and rather that Zenkais might have been something instead preparing their bodies in order to be able to attain a higher evolution of their physical nature, which is the Super Saiyan. That's why Goku, instead of just getting another giant Zenkai when he's fighting Frieza or scaling up to his opponent like they do in Dragon Ball Super, the continuity is different in Dragon Ball the manga, and Dragon Ball Z, the anime, where they don't just continue to get stronger and stronger as they're fighting their opponent without healing and everything like that. No, instead, the only time they're going to get a Zenkai boost, if they still do get one, which none of them are ever mentioned this arc except for with Cell, is when they, come back from near death. Goku and none of these other fighters are coming back from near death at this point in time, and there's no super powerful character for them to scale up to that they can actually sense the power of, which brings up the androids, why they don't get Zenkais and just defeat the androids easily, why they don't get gigantic boosts in power and just kill the androids with one poke, because that's not how Dragon Ball Z worked. That's only how Dragon Ball Super works. So keep that in mind. This is a different continuity of scaling than Super. Otherwise, they would never lose to the androids. They would just kill them all in their base forms and never have to transform at all because they trained off screen for more than 2 days or 4 months or whatever else you want to say that happens in Super. But anyway, let's keep going. So at this point, we do have it where the two of these characters spar. Trunks goes to attack Goku, but of course Goku doesn't sense malicious intent within him, and thus as a result, he doesn't try to block. But this time, Goku does the same thing that Trunks is doing when he swings his sword, imbuing it with his ki, but this time imbuing his finger with ki. So a lot of people put a lot of stress into this particular aspect here. Goku is literally defending himself against Trunks with one finger. Now, at this point in time, we do see that Trunks is sweating a little bit. However, whether he isn't necessarily because of the effort, rather he is saying that, he's super impressed by the power of Goku. You could read it either one of those ways. The fact of the matter is that he says amazing, that you're even better than the stories that I have been told of you. This is the same sword that I used to slice right through Frieza. Nobody ever remembers this next part. But Goku says that's only because you weren't trying your hardest. So keep this in mind. Trunks was not trying to kill Goku here, obviously. If he went back in time and chopped Goku up, then that would have ruined the entire reason he went back in time to begin with. And so as a result, he didn't go full power, and neither did Goku. So you could still say that Goku is stronger than Trunks, especially based upon this statement. But again, in terms of ordering, this statement here about how Trunks wasn't trying his hardest came afterward. Now, I was going to get to it later on, but I will bring it up briefly in case you guys forget. Gohan implied, future Gohan, in Trunks' backstory, which is way later in this manga of the arc, that Goku was still more powerful than Gohan in the future at this point in time. We had assumed that it's this point in time here with Yardrat Goku, because the fact is that, well, that is the last strongest version of Goku before, the divergence in the timelines. He would have theoretically trained harder and so on and so forth that he would have experienced. Now, in the future timeline, Goku killed King Cold and Frieza, not Trunks. So it's worth keeping that in mind, that if Gohan was weaker than Goku here, and if Trunks and Gohan are relative to one another, then that would mean that you could argue that they're both weaker than him and maybe weaker than Goku was on Namek. But again, when it comes to their power levels, I would still give Goku an edge here and say that maybe his power level was like the upper 100 and something million. I don't think that he got a giant boost. Like, again, Vegeta trains in Dragon Ball Super and learns Spirit and all the other stuff and gets a huge boost and everything. That didn't happen with Goku here. He barely had time to train, and he just learned the Shunkan Ito teleportation and how to go Super Saiyan at will. So somewhat stronger than he was on Namek. Not a big difference. But with that being said, that leads into the years of training that come afterward. And we can even see that right here. Toriyama actually drew this, which weirdly the anime did not show it to us, with regard to seeing everybody training side by side. Now, let's talk a little bit about the powers of these different characters, because again, this is something that becomes very ambiguous and something that a lot of people over time and over the years have speculated about how strong they believe the characters actually are with regard to everything here. So right before this happened, let me show you. We have a scene where Piccolo tells everybody that if you don't believe, so let's see. He says right here essentially that if you guys do not think you'll be powerful enough in order to fight and to be able to endure the upcoming battle in 3 years, then don't bother showing up. So a lot of people over time have said and argued that this means that literally every single fighter that we're going to see in this cool spread page right here is stronger than Mecha Frieza and Future Trunks. Personally, I do not agree with that at all. I think that there is a very, very lacking argument to suggest that Yamcha, Krillin, Tien, Chaozu, Gohan in his base form are all stronger than Super Saiyan Future Trunks. You can even argue that Piccolo is not as strong as he was either, because the fact is that they later on compare him to a Super Saiyan. Again, I'll get into that later on, but I don't align with that. I think that that's another example of people having just insane degrees of power inflation in the Dragon Ball story and the power scaling that they believe in. And rather, I think that these characters certainly do get a lot stronger, but I don't think that some of them got as strong as other ones. For instance, we have Goku here training as a Super Saiyan against Piccolo and Gohan. Again, it's something that's left out of the anime for some weird reason, but Gohan obviously didn't get, let's say this power level at the end of Namek was like around 1 million or something because of the 2 Zenkais he got fighting against Frieza, or, roughly just giant power boost. His power when he raged out made it to where he was able to push back and make third form Frieza use his full power. So I would say that maybe he got a couple times stronger, maybe 3 million, low millions, I would say. For Piccolo, I would say that his power level normally, and I'll get into what that means, would probably be the low 100 and something million range, maybe upper 80, 90 million range. But I would say that he's probably a little bit below the Super Saiyan. So like Goku on Namek range, like lower than that, maybe something like that, before he gets into using some of his other powers as well, which I'll get into with his short bursts and everything like that. Goku, I would say personally, didn't get that much stronger during these 3 years of training. I know it sounds insane. Why wouldn't Goku get way stronger when 3 years pass? But because, well, he's training with way weaker opponents, and he's training in order to fight against an enemy that he cannot sense, that he can't conceptualize in his mind. And every time characters get huge boosts in power, it's because they can sense and conceptualize the power of a stronger fighter, which we see later on. In this case, they just know that these characters are stronger than Frieza, stronger than the Trunks who showed up, and would be able to kill the Super Saiyan. So they train as hard as they can without knowing what that really means, and they get a little bit stronger as Super Saiyan. So Goku, personally, I would say his power level is maybe like 200 million, maybe a little bit higher than that, but I wouldn't really say it's higher than 225 million. Vegeta, on the other hand, his base form was already like 2 million-ish, 2.5, something like that when he got killed by Frieza. Now, unless you believe in post-death resurrection Zenkais, I don't think his base would be that much higher afterward. He was still weaker than Goku, and as a Super Saiyan, he would have been until he trained under 300 times gravity for 3 years and pushed himself to his very limits and achieved Super Saiyan. At that point in time, when we finally get to him, and I'll get to that later, I'm not trying to spoil this too much for everybody, he is stronger than Goku because he was using way more extreme power training comparative to Goku, and he was training with Goku in his mind. He knew how strong he was because he saw him fight against Trunks, and he saw Trunks, and he saw Frieza, everybody like that. He sensed them. They were his benchmark, and he surpassed them with even harder training. So Vegeta becomes the strongest during these 3 years in time. Krillin, I'd put him in the low millions range personally, maybe 1 to 3 million. Same thing as Tien. I'd put that both of them are basically around the range of power of the base Saiyans. So whatever the base power of the Saiyans are, so like, let's say somewhere within 3 to 5 million range, like 4 million-ish, let's say something like that at this point in time, I would put Tien and I would put Krillin. Additionally, I would say that Tien is stronger, especially based on what we see later on a little bit. So let's say that Tien has a 4 million and that Krillin has a 3.5. If you think that power levels mean anything at this point in time, I'm just throwing them out there for the people who love those power levels, right? And then, of course, we have Yamcha. I'd say that Yamcha is probably maybe like 1 to 3 million. Like, I would say that he's the weakest one not named Chaozu. Chia Pet, and so he is somewhere weaker, but a little bit later on we get an estimate that shows that he is actually not weak at all. So all these characters I would say are in the low millions, with Chaozu maybe being like below, the only one below it. But I don't think that they all surpass Frieza. I think that they just got as strong as they could, but they're just gonna be behind everybody because they don't have a Super Saiyan form that makes them dozens of times stronger. If you believe in the multipliers, there are people who believe that everybody's multiplier drops significantly after Namek, and that as a result, Goku's power level as a Super Saiyan is only like 2 to 5 times stronger than his base form. If you believe in that, then yes, you can argue that all these characters are stronger, but that's where the ambiguity of power scaling comes in after Namek. And personally, I would say that every single character here is not stronger than Frieza, but 3 of them are, with those being Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Make sure to stay tuned for the next episode of this power scaling series of the Cell Saga. Also, get your own copy today of my first book, Nemesis of the Absence, the first in the Children of Mon series, because of course, as I always say, stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. Trunks. Future Trunks.
And you better subscribe!